Jiudun Skylight is located in Dashing Township, Duan County, Guangxi. At first glance, it looks like a large pond at the village entrance. But beneath the calm surface lies China's and even Asia's deepest cave, known as the underwater Mount Everest. How deep is this cave exactly? In 2023, Chinese cave diving legend Han Ting dove to 234 meters in one go, breaking the national cave diving depth record. When asked what it's like below 234 meters, he remained silent for a moment and shook his head. Because of this is not only a popular tourist attraction, but also a dream destination for cave divers worldwide. According to the cross-section diagram hand-drawn by Han Ting, Jiudun Skylight has two entrances below the surface, North Cave and South Cave. Most divers take the North Cave. Going down all the way, there's a platform at 21 meters and another at 50 meters, like resting spots nature specifically left for you. At 110 meters, the north and south routes merge into one. The space suddenly opens up, but this doesn't last long. Starting at 164 meters, the cave walls sharply close in, turning into a pitch-black vertical shaft. At 215 meters, it splits into an inverted Y shape. What lies further down? Only the Earth knows. On the 26th of September 2021, Dong Jie, Gong Ziwei, and Ah Guai drove to Jiudun Skylight. The three were excellent divers, especially Dong Jie. He was Master Han Ting's only regular diving partner, having dived to 120 meters in Jiudun Skylight over a dozen times. He was very familiar with this place. According to their plan, Dong Jie and Gong Ziwei would first dive to 120 meters, then return to 60 meters to meet Ah Guai, who was providing support. Eventually, the three would decompress and ascend together. At 6 p.m., Dong Jie and Gong Ziwei entered the water first. Their figures gradually disappeared beneath the surface. 10 minutes later, Ah Guai followed them down, reaching the meeting point at 60 meters underwater. According to their plan, Dong Jie and Gong Ziwei should have at 6:20 returned to 60 meters. But time passed minute by minute. There wasn't even a bubble in the water. Ah Guai stared intensely into the darkness below. Panic began to set in. Watching the air gauge numbers drop bit by bit, waiting any longer and he'd be in danger too. So he gritted his teeth and began ascending. Before leaving, he placed a line marker by the spare cylinder at 50 meters. If the two came back and saw it, at least they'd know he had gone up first. Ah Guai decompressed and ascended all the way. He saw no trace of them during the entire process. After surfacing, he immediately called the dive center for help and reported to the police. He made 2 more descents to search for them, but the backup tanks at the decompression stop hadn't been touched. The outcome was clear. When the news broke, the entire diving community was in an uproar. Top experts like Dong Jie and Gong Ziwei had an accident at 120 meters. It was like a swimming coach drowning in a pool. No one could believe it. But this time, the impossible had truly happened. When Han Ting heard the news, he rushed from the South China Sea to Duan. Cave divers from across the country rushed to help. But the rescue faced a fatal problem. 120 meters in a cave and 120 meters in open water, they are worlds apart. Divers in China who can reach this depth number no more than 50, and being able to dive there doesn't mean being able to conduct a rescue. Those who can truly conduct search and rescue at this depth number no more than 5 nationwide. That evening, cave diving master Hai Tao rushed overnight from Nanning. At this point, over 7 hours had passed since the two lost contact. Hope of survival was almost zero. Hai Tao still wanted to dive, even if just to bring them up. But to avoid further accidents, police had sealed off the scene. Diving was prohibited that day. On September 27, Hai Tao and Ah Guai began the first rescue operation. The target was the platform at 50 meters in the North Cave. But after going down twice, all they brought up was silence. After 9 p.m., Han Ting finally arrived. The rescue team instantly had their backbone. But everyone was exhausted from traveling, having not slept all night, and they were about to face an extremely dangerous deep cave rescue. Even more cruel, over 24 hours had passed since the accident. The possibility of survival was almost zero. The rescue team abandoned the plan to dive overnight, deciding to rest for the night and dive for rescue the next day. At 7:30 a.m. on September 28, the second rescue operation officially began. To prevent accidents, the rescue team arranged support divers at 9, 40, and 60 meters in the North Cave to assist. At that time, Haitao was not yet capable of performing rescues below 100 meters, so he searched between 150 meters. Han Ting continued down alone along the main line, entering the area below 120 meters. This area's terrain is like a half funnel. The bottom narrows at 164 meters, with a large rock blocking it. If anyone lost control and sank from below 120 meters, they would eventually slide to this position. Han Ting searched carefully all around. There was nothing. Because the depth was so great, searching underwater only lasted a few minutes, but decompression took over 3 hours. By the time the two surfaced, the entire morning had passed. In the afternoon, another group entered from the South Cave. Cave diving relies on guidelines. Divers follow the line in and follow it out. Jiudun Skylight already has a mature and complex line system. Between 120 meters in the North Cave and 105 meters in the South Cave, there's a guideline connecting the two caves. Although Dongjie and Gongziwei had no plan to go to the South Cave, but Aguai saw no bubbles at the meeting point. So they may have followed the wrong line and mistakenly entered the South Cave. And at 50 meters in the South Cave, there's a horizontal turning point. If the two had an accident in the South Cave, after running out of air, they should have floated up and stopped here. But after divers searched between 70 to 30 meters for a long time, there were still no findings. On September 29, the search continued. Those diving were still Han Ting and Haitao. This day's plan was more complex. Han Ting entered from the South Cave, searching the connection area between the North and South Caves, finally exiting from the North Cave. While Haitao went down from the North Cave, waiting at 90 meters, providing light signals for Han Ting. This middle area structure was very complex. How many domes and hidden passages were inside? Even Han Ting didn't know. He searched carefully again and again, going into unfamiliar areas, searching inch by inch. This search covered a larger area and took longer. From when Han Ting entered to when he exited, it took almost over 4 hours. Plus, the water temperature was only 21 degrees. Both were shivering from cold when they came up. Their strength was almost exhausted, so they decided to rest for a day. After searching everywhere, they'd searched the main line and the entire north-south connection area. There was nothing. The two people had vanished as if into thin air. After reasoning back and forth, only two possibilities remained. Either they deviated from the main line and entered some unknown side passage, or on the way from the North Cave to the South Cave, lost consciousness due to nitrogen, narcosis, or other causes, and fell into the unknown space below. If the divers consumed a lot of air, overall being positively buoyant, they would have floated to the ceiling at the north-south junction, but this area had already been searched. There was nothing. There was another possibility. The two had a lot of air remaining, overall being negatively buoyant, sinking all the way down, falling into the unexplored depths of the cave bottom. If this was really the case, never mind Han Ting, even gods would find it hard to rescue them. At this point, someone suggested using an underwater robot to search. But the cave structure above 120 meters was far too intricate. The robot would easily get stuck. Someone else said divers could bring the robot through the complex sections. After reaching below 120 meters, then release it for deep searching. The problem was in the high-pressure environment below 160 meters, the failure rate was extremely high. Equipment costing over 1 million yuan might very well not come back. Since going down was not possible, the rescue team decided to change their approach, to thoroughly search every corner above 120 meters. The first day of National Day, also the 6th day since the two went missing, Han Ting and Haitao entered the water again. The target was a suspended small platform at 120 meters underwater. Diving has always been called inner space by enthusiasts, so Dongjie once said he wanted to build a space capsule model there and had even shown them videos. Imagine this. At 120 meters underwater, in pitch-black darkness where you can't see your hand, on a suspended rock platform, sits a lone space capsule-shaped architectural model. With no audience, no lights, only a handful of people in the world have the ability to get there. And Dongjie wanted in this uninhabited realm to leave behind his own ultimate romance. But where exactly was that platform? Only he himself knew. Currently, Han Ting only had 2 pieces of information. The platform was at a depth of 120 meters, about 1 minute's travel from the main guide line. But this area was incredibly vast. To search it completely would take at least 10 minutes. At this depth, every extra minute is gambling with your life. Decompression time also increases exponentially. Han Ting could only quickly scan around and photograph the platform. The team repeatedly verified the depth and terrain against the video. Nothing matched. This day was again fruitless. On October 2, after consecutive days of deep diving, Hai Tao showed symptoms of decompression sickness and could only stay at 9 meters underwater for oxygen treatment. This day, only Han Ting dived alone for rescue. He dived again to 120 meters, quickly searching around. The result was nothing. When ascending to over 100 meters, Han Ting glimpsed a shallow cave nearby. From the side, it looked like an eave. Previously, he thought it was too shallow, impossible to hide a person. Didn't pay it any attention at all. But at that moment, he didn't know why. Instinctively, just wanted to take a look. When he got closer, inside the shallow cave was hidden a passage. He flipped over, swimming up along the slope. When he reached 92 meters depth, he found remains. This was Dong Jie, who had been missing for 6 days. Dong Jie was not only Han Ting's only diving partner, but also his best friend. Only this reunion had not a single word. Because Dong Jie's body had been submerged for days, the body tissues had become extremely fragile. With the slightest carelessness, surfacing would cause instant disintegration due to the pressure shift. So Han Ting could only endure his grief, dragging Dong Jie's body slowly ascending, temporarily placing it at 50 meters. After a long decompression process, Han Ting surfaced, but he had no time to stop. Dong Jie had not yet been brought ashore. Gong Ziwei was still missing. On the evening of October 3, after a day of decompression, Dong Jie's body tissues gradually adapted. Han Ting dived into the water again, removing Dong Jie's diving equipment. 2 other divers brought the remains to 40 meters. At this point, the only forensic doctor in the country who could dive, Dr. Liang, entered the water to 40 meters to perform punctures on the remains, completely releasing the gas accumulated inside. The recovery was extremely long and complicated. Until late at night, Dong Jie was finally officially brought to the surface. Because the water in the North Cave had been contaminated, the forensic doctor required it must sit for 24 hours. All personnel and equipment had to be disinfected. The rescue operation for Gong Ziwei had to be suspended. On October 4, the water quality in the North Cave was still being purified. The rescue team took this time to extract data from Dong Jie's dive computer, trying to reconstruct the accident from it and deduce Gong Ziwei's possible location. The anxious Han Ting didn't wait, but instead took the rescue personnel to the South Cave and searched the side caves above 115 meters again. The result was still nothing. On October 5, the rescue team went to the funeral home in Hechi City and attended Dong Jie's memorial service. On October 6, based on the data from Dong Jie's dive computer, the rescue team reached a conclusion. Given his personality, he would never leave Gong Ziwei and act alone. The two should have been together at the end. Since Dong Jie was in that side passage, Gong Ziwei should still be deeper inside. So Han Ting and Hai Tao entered the water again, going into the side passage. After carefully looking around, they found there was another slope above. The slope's surface had obvious friction marks. The knot Dong Jie had tied was still hanging there. This indicated he had slid down from the slope above. The two followed the traces upward and indeed found Gong Ziwei at 89 meters. Because there wasn't much air left, the two didn't have time to move the remains, could only complete decompression first and surface. On October 7th, the operation to recover Gong Ziwei officially began. The process was the same as for Dong Jie. First moving to 51 meters for initial decompression, removing equipment, then to 40 meters for the doctor to puncture and release the gas. After the remains stabilize, slowly bringing them to the surface. At this point, this 10 days rescue operation finally came to an end. As for why the two ended up in this unplanned side passage, whether by mistake or active exploration, it's impossible to know. The only thing that could be found was an interview with Aguai. According to his recollection, after the bodies were recovered, they analyzed the dive computer data from both, inspected all the equipment, and finally concluded, when the two dived to 120 meters, one person's equipment suddenly malfunctioned. The other immediately went to rescue. During ascent, the two mistakenly entered that unknown side passage and never came out. At that time, they were only 30 meters from Aguai. 30 meters on land is just a few steps away, but in a cave, it's the distance between life and death. Just like Dong Jae's social media signature, there will always be unexpected goodbyes in this world and merciless endings. Perhaps from the first time he stepped into this darkness, he already knew this day would come. After all, cave diving is listed as the second most dangerous extreme sport in the world. The deceased have gone. The living remain. No matter what, may all divers, every time they enter the water, return safely.